1907. This is her words. In the spring of 1907, I decided to go to Zamboanga to visit Lulu. It's in February, and even the month that she visited us in Cotabato wasn't half long enough to get in all the debating that I had waited for so long. She was summoned straight from home after almost 4 years of just letters. She now had a good government position in the district attorney's office in Zambo. When the general's launch stopped at Cotabato one morning in April on the way to Zambo, Matt made arrangements for me and the 2 children to make the trip. I had about 3 hours to get ready, and maybe you didn't think I'd take. About 4 in the afternoon, I got on board with Marjorie, 2 months old, and Bud, a little over 2 years. As the general wasn't on board this trip, and I was the only woman, they gave me the general's stateroom. It was big and roomy, and I arranged my things so as to be able to get off promptly at 6 the next morning. We went about 10 miles to Cotabato River and on out to sea, the launch boat. In one of the berths, Bud and I went to dinner. John Gallagher, an old friend from Zambo, was the only one on board I knew. There were about 10 people at the table. After dinner, I sat out on deck enjoying the cool breezes that swept over the small boat. Both children were asleep. Before starting this trip, it seemed like a Herculean job to travel alone so far with 2 children. Now I congratulate myself that everything was getting along very well, and I thought of the grand entry I was going to make into Zambo the next morning, taking Lulu by surprise. I would show everyone that even 2 babies couldn't keep me home, and that I could travel as well as anyone with them. About 10 o'clock, I went to bed in the big, comfortable stateroom with the star over the door, feeling very proud of myself. I awoke in the middle of the night with a violent attack of indigestion, something I had eaten. The pain got progressively worse. I got out of bed and groped for a light, but the switch didn't work. I rang the bell, but it was also out of order. I heard Bud stirring in the top bunk. He awoke and decided to come down to me. Without warning, he came down head first toward me. I tried to catch him, but missed him in the dark, and he hit his head against the corner of my suitcase. When I picked him up, I could feel the warm blood trickling down his face over my hand. I tried again to get someone to come to help me by ringing the bell. There was no response, and still no light. I bathed his face in the dark with cold water, and holding him up so the moonlight shone on him, could see that his eyes weren't injured. The cut was right over one eye. I held him till he was asleep and put him in the lower berth beside the baby. I then realized that I was in awful pain but couldn't do anything about it. I climbed into the top berth and waited for daylight. At about 5:30 a.m., I saw Mr. Gallagher passing along the deck, getting ready to get off. I called to him and asked him to break the joyful news to Lulu that I was coming to visit her, but was too sick to go ashore unless she came to get me and the children. In a few minutes, she and Mrs. Gallagher came aboard, and between them I went down to the pier, doubled over with pain. Lulu carried the baby in the suitcase, and Mrs. Gallagher took charge of Bud. Thus, I arrived in Zambo. They got the children and me to the waiting Caramadas. Lulu was boarding at a very nice house filled mostly with government office employees. She helped me get to her office. Then when she got back at noon, I was feeling better, but still not able to get up. In the meantime, she had been informed by the landlady that I couldn't stay there, even for the week I had planned to remain. She couldn't have children in the house. What to do next? Of course there wasn't such a thing as a hotel in the whole town. I began to wish I had never left my happy home in Cotabato. Then, out of a clear sky, a friend I had known while we lived in Zambo the year before, Mrs. John Springer, wife of Judge Springer, came to my rescue. It seemed that her husband was away on a trip, and she and her baby, about a year old, were alone. She said she would love to have me stay with her. Is that all right? No one could imagine what a welcome invitation it was. I was at my wit's end to know where to turn. She took me into her lovely home right over the ocean and did everything possible to make me comfortable. I'll never forget her hospitality. I stayed there the whole week and had a wonderful time. Lulu came over after office hours every night, and we had many nice visits.
Okay.
Do you want to run it back or turn it off?
See that the background was showing. Wasn't all white.
Now see how that is. Did I get it this time?
You have it turned off?
Yeah.
It still is. You have to move it still
Okay.
a little over.
Okay.
What is it doing?
Well, we had a nice white background, and this, I had it.
Am I out of focus now when I do that, when I move that?
No, you're just doing fine. Yeah, that looks good. Go ahead.
Look okay?
And you can take up where you left off.
I think it's going to be okay. At the end of the week, I took passage on a Spanish boat which stopped at Zamboanga on the way to Cotabato. We stopped first at Malabang, Zamboanga on the way to Cotabato. We stopped first at Malabang and then at Paray, where a lot of stuff for the troops was unloaded. The captain sent word to anyone going on to Cotabato to get off at Parang. He had changed his mind and wasn't going any further, but would return to Manila. On receiving this delightful news, I packed my stuff and with the help of a native boy, got it and the children down to the dock. Parang consisted of an army post and town on the hill beyond the wharf. I didn't know a soul of the whole place, and it was impossible to find a place to stay for the night, under any circumstances. I soon found out that Captain Quartermaster from Cotabato had arrived in his launch to take back some supplies for the post, and I made arrangements to go back with him. We were supposed to leave about 2 p.m. However, he and the officers of the big boat were talking and laughing and enjoying themselves, and 2 o'clock came and went, and so did 3 and 4 o'clock. By this time, the wind had come up and the signs of threatening storm appeared over the water. The little launch stood bobbing on the pier, all ready to go at the word from the quartermaster. The native captain of the launch got more worried as the wind increased and the waves got bigger and bigger. Several times he went to the door of the salon where the boat where the officers were sitting around the table laughing and talking. He informed the quartermaster that it was time to start, as it looked as if the storm were making in from the sea. He only laughed and told him not to worry, that he would be along soon. About 5 o'clock he came sauntering out of the room and said goodbye to the officers of the boat and boarded the launch. The native captain, who had been looking out to sea with a telescope all afternoon, advised him not to start now, that we'd run right into a storm if we did. It was nearly dark already and the waves were getting bigger all the time. He thought we ought to stay right where we were until morning. The quartermaster wouldn't listen to him and said no, we were going right away. And we did. Besides myself, there was a lieutenant and his bride who were returning from their honeymoon in Manila. There were also 2 sergeants' wives coming to Cotabato for the first time. And as the little launch made its way out to sea, the waves would break right over the deck. After a few minutes, they ordered us 4 women and my 2 children down below so we wouldn't be washed overboard. We went down about the 6 steps and found just standing room below. Then they fastened down the trap door at the top of the stairs. We could hear the men running around on top and shouting at each other. The launch tipped down on one side and then on the other. When the waves washed over the deck, the water came down in streams through the crack of the trap door and soaked our faces. We were scared to death and expected every minute to feel the whole thing going down, carrying us with it locked in. I began to think what I could do to save the children when the launch broke up and we were all in the water. The sergeants' wives were most sympathetic and offered to hold the baby for me. I thanked them, but took one child under each arm and thought I'd try and grab onto something with my teeth when the crash came. The bride was indignant at the whole procedure. Her bridal finery was ruined and her hair hanging in strings about her face. She had on the first makeup that I had ever seen. That is, she had it on when we started, but this time she was as pale as the rest of us. She was, most of all, furious to be shut in with the sergeant's wives. When we were going down the stairs, she remarked that she certainly didn't want to have to associate with these people. They certainly showed themselves far more sensible in the emergency in which we found ourselves. After standing below, watching the feet of the men dashing back and forth over our heads and feeling the launch tip and right itself for an eternity, it seemed to us, all of a sudden, it got quiet above. The launch seemed to be stopping. We looked at each other and wondered if this was the end. It was the end of our misery. Our little Filipino captain had finally gotten the launch turned toward shore and into a little cove. There was a naval station on the coast we were passing, and by wonderful maneuvering, he succeeded in getting the launch headed toward the harbor of safety. Soon someone opened the door and told us to come up. We came, thankfully, to stand on the soaking deck and watched as we drew near to a little wharf. Lights were shining in several houses, and people were running out to the wharf to welcome us. We tied up alongside of this little Navy station, and we were soon being made welcome in the captain's house. His wife rushed around, making us all comfortable. She gave me a lovely big room, dry clothes, and said she would heat the milk for the baby's bottle. As soon as the children were fed and in bed, we all sat down to a lovely dinner. The bride refused to come out of her room. She was disgusted at things in general, and nothing our hostess could do could induce her to appear. After dinner, the quartermaster sent a runner over to the hills to Cotabato to let the people know where we were and that we would be there in the morning. He said we would leave at 6 a.m. if the weather was good. I certainly was thankful to get into a warm bed with the children alongside of me after all we had gone through. In the morning, the storm had cleared and the sun was shining, and we said goodbye to our hosts. I never saw them again, but they certainly had been wonderfully kind to us after our terrifying experience. They told us that they had been watching the launch for ages before it got turned toward shore and never expected to see it land. They thought it would go down right before their eyes. So ended my pleasure trip. No wonder I didn't try to travel anymore for a long time. Can you see the light on this head? This is just a woman's head. Are you getting the picture from there?
What kind of wood is that?
This I don't know. It was some wood that was given to me. I really don't know what kind it is. It's hardwood, though, very hardwood, and it has a lot of nice natural grain in it. Now that's all I wanted to see about this. Okay. You want to see another one? So this little head is named Pensive, as you can see. That's what it looks like. And it's been a nice piece of wood to work with, and I can't tell you what kind it is. It was given to me, and I don't know the time of it, except it was a very hardwood, and I've left the base of it with its natural wood forms like this, and I haven't carved those. So I think that makes a nice little head.
Can you turn it even some more there?
This
Keep
way?
turning. Yes, I think that's really nice.
Right around there, you can see it. I've got it. And that's about all for that one. Okay.
Okay, for her to start?
Yeah.
This was a awfully nice piece of wood that my cousin Philip sent me from Hawaii. After we got back, we visited him over there, and his name was Sarah, I think S-E-R-A, and it's so precious that they make jewelry out of it. That's why it's got this lovely color. It took almost nothing except just rubbing it with a little oil, and he was worried that this hole here in the side of the sculpture was going to bother it, but I used that as part of the design. And that's about all I need to say about that, if you want.
Why don't you back up?
Can you see that you're quite a ways off from this? You got the light on that?
Steve, isn't this light?
This is a female figure, and we'll soon see the one that's a male figure. These two pieces were carved out of the same piece of wood that had been split down the middle. And this was the split side of it, and when you see the other figure has the other side of this. And this is walnut, a very well preserved walnut. It had been out in the open for years, I think this woman told me, 10 years or something like that. And it was lovely to carve because it was a very solid, didn't chip off or anything like that. Made a very nice piece of wood to carve.
And what did you call that?
This is just a female figure, one of a pair in walnut. That's the only name it's got. This is the other half of the same log that was split right down the middle like this. Great big log. And out of the same piece of log as a female figure. This is a male figure that goes with this two as a pair. And this was also a real nice piece of wood. Of course, walnut again, like the other part.
And you left some texture, didn't you?
Yeah, this is a combination of the texture of the gouges and the scraping and with glass and hardly any sanding. I hardly ever use sandpaper. Sandpaper tends to just rough up the surface and make it absorb too much oil. Mostly this is scraping with glass and the combination of the gouge marks on there on the insides. There, no, that's for that one. This is one of my favorite ones, one of the best pieces of wood I ever had. It's also lignin or ironwood. And the name of this is interior exterior. You can see why that is. I'll get rid of this a little bit more. This is good from all directions. It's got with a real nice big piece of wood, and I'm using the outside of the wood as well as the very dark interior.
It's got a different character entirely on the other side. It's a different personality. That's fine.
You can kind of see on the inside of it as well as the outside.
Very organic.
And there's a difference in the color here, quite a bit of difference in the color of the outside of the, this would be right inside the bark right here. It's still kind of light color. And the inside is almost black. There. There's down there.
Toby! He doesn't even hear me, does he?
No, he can't hear a single thing.
We'll get him later if he comes
It's done with a scrap of ironwood that I had and had it sitting around for a long time. Didn't think it was going to be worth anything. If there was anything I could do with it. But I got it out one day and started cutting it because ironwood is so nice to work with. Ironwood is fine and it doesn't have grains going any one way or other, so it doesn't chip off in pieces. And you can cut it almost any way. And this one is the novitiate.
The robes, I love the way they swing beautifully.
Did you get a picture of that one? And if this picture comes out in it, this is one of the first compositions I ever did outside of Stockton, and it's called The Dirty Kitchen, and that's when I was painting it. I was trying to make a composition for the first time after I'd been to art school again for composition. Okay, that's all of that then. Just hold it up like that. This hasn't got any name at all to it. Just a little quick one would be all right.
Your hand looks like part of the sculpture.
You tell me when you're ready to go, Steve. Okay, hello, Steve. Come on in. I'm just working on this little thing now. Just barely getting it started. Did you want to take a picture of some of the other sculptures?
Sure.
All right, let's go start with this one right here. This one is called Holding. This was also one of the real good pieces of ironwood that I got in Mexico years ago.
Did you say holy?
Holding.
Holding.
Holding. Because it could be one figure or two figures. And when you get around this way, you can see what I mean by holding. It looks like the figure is holding, people holding each other is what it really is. Get this one Can you get up close enough to see what that is, Steve, on that?
Yeah.
This is about one of the best places. Oh, it sure needs love that. Okay, we would go on to another one. Shall I go on right now?
Okay, what about up here at this collection?
Well, this is such a mess up here, but
Oh, it's a nice collection.
you can look up here if you want to. These are things I'm working with.
Those, you don't have to move them, they look fine.
This guy can lie on his back, and it's just another good one. It was done to be lying on his back, and then I decided he looks nicer this way. So, and I don't know what his name is. He hasn't got a name. And that's a bird, which is pretty awful looking. Now I'll take this down and you can see this one. This is just kind of doodling. That's all I can say for it. It's kind of doodling. It's a nice piece of wood. Didn't turn out to be anything very good at first, and so I just did something like that with it. Now it's got some nice spots on it, nothing special. This is a little bitty head that I was doing because I'm not able to do the heavy big carving now that I used to do. And it turned out to be kind of a nice little head.
And those are your drawings, aren't they, on the wall?
This was in Mexico, in Yucatan.
No, I meant the sketches. Are those yours?
Yeah, these are the drawings that I'm using for this new one that's here. Here's a little one that isn't finished yet, and I don't know whether it's going to be finished. Can you see it at all behind the... Now, I think you'll have to come up the steps, Steve, to see any of these.
I think that he can come right over to this railing here. Why don't you stop?
It'd be nice to have it for a record.
What is that called?
It's called oval shapes.
And I think he can move up above.
Highlight started leaking a little bit, and we got this wet. This is called bone forms. And you can probably see why it's called bone forms. It's the shape of different
Looks
bones.
like a part of a mastodon.
Of the body, yes, it could be. This is a piece of wood of a monkey pod that they use in Hawaii a lot to make bowls and things. Very nice wood. But we had an awful time to get any monkey pod down there. All the monkey pod trees had been cleaned out and killed off by people using them to make bowls with. And so they have to go clear to Tahiti to get monkey pod. And we happened to find this one piece that this old Chinese man and his wife had these sitting out in the front yard to keep the automobiles from running over his front yard. And we got this one piece and carried it all the way back on our like luggage. I had it partly carved already so that I could prove to the agriculture people that we weren't bringing wormy wood back home with us. There, that one.
Let me put this one up. Whoops, that is heavy too.
Oh, you can't lift it, Carol.
Okay, well, I'll just put it where you can see it.
This is called Orange Trio.
Oh, Steve, you're not taking that, are you? Steve.
Can you see them from up above like that, or is that spoiling them?
Oh, hold it and let me get the chair.
I'll move this around too much. This is made out of Osage orange that we got from the Benjamins years ago in Stockton. And they had cured this wood by letting it lie in a creek, if you can believe it, for years, like 10 years or something like that. And it's really hard and beautiful wood. I did this quite a long while ago when I was first started carving. I don't even know how many years ago it would be now, 15 years ago maybe. And I kind of like it. It was so simple, and I haven't kept anything as simple as that since. Now, did you go to try this little fellow, or are you too far up there? This is one that when they were interviewing me for the Sacramento Bee, this man put in the paper that this looked like a figure H. Does it look like a figure H? Is it supposed to be like that? One is the King and Queen. And this is one that I did quite a long while ago. And this was also an Osage orange. I was trying some different things in these days, and one of the things I was trying was to stain the wood. So I actually put some stain on there, but it didn't hold very well, which is a good thing, because the wood itself is very nice just by itself. So this is the King and Queen. There. Now, think that's all.
At that bottom one,
Yes,
I
he
don't-
got those before.
No, Mom, I think you're moving things too much, and that is all.
Wood that's been around probably since the mines were here, and it was an old piece, and it was apparently a cypress knee, according to what I was told, which means that they cut it off of a huge cypress tree that they were using to use for other things. But this was so wiggly and everything, they didn't want it. So it had another piece in the front that was just like some of these pieces here. And the piece came out, and I was going to try to get it back in again. Then I realized that the insides of these was just as interesting to look at as the outside. So I finished those up and polished them up, and so now it's I call it Desert Riders, and nobody else can see Desert Riders in it. But every time I look at it, I see camel riders going across the desert this way. So that's what the name of this is, Desert Riders, for better or worse. It's beautiful wood. It's just polished without any problems at all. It practically polished itself.
Oh, that is pretty, that one.
And on these special spots on it, like right here, it just looks like a piece of jewelry almost. They turned out, that was almost the way they were. I just finished them off. That's really all I did.
Sort of like you released it.
Yeah, but I didn't have to chop huge pieces out like I do with a lot of them. Just as solid and heavy as they can be. There, now that's all that's enough. Oh, kid. Oh, I think quite a while ago. I haven't even got the date on this one. And this has been in Candy's room for quite a while. In fact, I think Candy owns this one. That's enough of that. And this wood we got in Mexico, and it was an awfully nice piece of wood. I don't have any idea what it was. They would write it down. The people would write it down when I got it, what the name of it was, and I'd find out they didn't know any more about it than I did. But that was that piece of wood that we brought from Mexico. Now, does that give you a little bit more light on there? Okay, that's fine. This wood came from Mexico, again, and I don't know what it was. It's hardwood, and it was very, very black. It almost could have been an ebony or something like that. I really don't know what it was, but it was a real nice piece to work with because it was so firm and a nice shape to start off with. Now, could you get around the corner here, Steve, and see that? I'll have to get it back and work on it some more, but it's turning out pretty good, and I didn't think at first it had anything to recommend it at all. That's all about that one. This is can you see it? You tell me, Steve, when you want me to start.
Go.
Okay. This was a piece of driftwood, and I usually don't work in driftwood, but it was such a nice piece, and I don't know whether you can see it at all except just through the light like that, a mother and child. And it was, whatever wood it was, I don't know, very hard. It was very beautiful wood to work with.
Did you find that in Mexico?
No, we found this up in the Mendocino coast. And now this one, I guess there's enough light on that. I'm not sure if this one or the other one was the one that Candy had first. I think it was this one that still belongs to me. She bought 2 or 3 of them, but I think this is mine. Are you taking pictures now?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. If you can get any kind of a light on that, that's all. This is one of the ones I had in the show at the Fourth Ward School a little while back. It was on the stand. But I also don't know, I think this is walnut too. I should have it written down on there, probably have it written down on somewhere. And it was walnut. It was kind of nice to work and has a nice finish to it. This is almost entirely finished with the gouge marks, as you can see. It has this little rippled effect.
Just a minute.
What was that?
Someone's home.
Okay, but you better stop it, Steve. That might be an interesting picture.
You know, I think Steve would be better going down back out.
Rupert Brooke, a British poet who was in the First World War and was killed in the First World War. And this is the way the poem went. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust that England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England, give a body of England, breathing English air, blessed by the rivers, kissed by sons of home. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal life no less, gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams, happy as her day, and laughter learned of friends and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven. Now, that is all of that one.
Okay.
Right now, these are two short written passages that my mother wrote about, as far as I can remember, it must have been 20 years ago or so, when she was getting kind of old, in her 70s, and Tootie wanted her to write down about the time when Bud was born, and then she wrote again the time that I was born. And this is going to be about the time that Bud was born. It was the 9th of December, 1904. I had been waiting since the first of the month, for I didn't exactly know the split signs, to send me flying to the hospital. As day after day went by and I still continued to feel ridiculously well as I had written home, I began to wonder if I ever would go. Each day I opened the packed suitcase and looked over everything to be sure I hadn't forgotten anything from the list I was supposed to bring with me. This was written in Manila. And at last, on the night of the 9th, I went to bed to sleep, only to wake up a few hours later with a strong conviction that this was the time to act. I awakened Matt to send him out to the nearest phone to notify the hospital to send the ambulance. In a few minutes we heard it stopping and tiptoed out to the street. There were 6 other Americans in the house in which we boarded, and we didn't want to waken them at 2 a.m. 2 attendants, American, I saw with pleasure, jumped down and opened the back of the car and came toward me with a stretcher. I almost laughed, as a stretcher was the last thing I wanted just then. After persuading them I was able to walk, they helped me in, and Matt wanted to accompany me, but I refused to have him come 3 miles to the hospital and walk back when he had to work the next day. Poor Matt. In a few minutes, we arrived at the civil hospital in Manila. The night nurse received me on the one and only occasion I was ever in a hospital as a patient. She said there was no hurry, that I could go to bed.
Put the paper down.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was so disgusted that I had come so soon. If I was going to wait around indefinitely. However, after 3 hours sleep, I awoke at 5 a.m. and was carried down a long flight of steep stairs on a stretcher by 2 white-clad native boys, and up a long flight of stairs in another building. It was beautiful in the early morning before the day had begun to get too hot. I was so pleased to be up and doing, ahead of everyone else in the same predicament, or so it seemed to me. At 7 a.m., in a hospital room with a strange nurse and a doctor I had never seen before, the one who had charge of my case had not yet arrived for the day, I was told that I had a little son. The news seemed too good to be true. It was all over, and here I was being carried back down the steep stairs again, and across the garden once more up to my room. This time a nurse followed the stretcher, carrying a little bundle. At the foot of the long flight of steps up, and saw her starting down with the precious bundle in her arms, I called to her, please, not to fall. She just laughed and kept on following. I suppose she thought I was crazy. I was almost. I was so pleased with everything in general, and with the little bundle in particular. Even in faraway, no, that was all the rest of that. That was the end of that. I'm sorry. This is the next one that my mother wrote, and this was about my birth. She was living in Mindanao, in Cotabato at this point. Even in faraway Mindanao, Washington's birthday was celebrated. The schools were closed, as well as the government offices. So on the morning of February 22nd, 1907, the feeling of a holiday pervaded our small nipa-covered house in Cotabato. Matt was home for the day. His office was closed. Bud was 2 years and 2 months old and played around the living room, which was cool and pleasant in the early morning. The house stood on a corner, shaded by big trees on 2 sides, and facing open country which gently sloped away and up to the top of Constabulary Hill, about 1.5 miles distance. After breakfast, I decided to put the finishing touches on my preparation for the little stranger who was due any day now. In the spring of 1907,
Blocking your face.
Mrs. Roeder, the wife of Captain Roeder of the Postal Service, had made me promise to call her in time for the great event. She never had a baby of her own, but loved ours dearly. She said she would never speak to me again if I didn't let her help me out on this particular emergency. So I would give her more pleasure. So I called Julio, our muchacho, and sent him with a note to her. I told her that if she could come up for a little while, I'd show her where everything we needed later would be found. In the meantime, Dr. Howells, a captain doctor, came over to play chess with Matt. Everything was quiet and peaceful, and then Mrs. Roeder showed up, and I showed her the necessary little things. Of Sir Lawnfall, a poem by James Russell Lowell. I learned this first part of this whole long poem years ago, and I forgot who wrote it. Recently I came across a beautiful small book which was in Aunt Catherine's effects. It was given as a gift to the O'Tooles with the inspiration wish team. And this was the poem, The Vision of Sir Lawnfall. Over his keys, the musing organist, beginning doubtfully and far away, first lets his vision travel as he lists, and builds a bridge from dreamland for his lay. Then, as the touch of his loved instrument brings hope and fervor, nearer draws his theme, first guessed by faint auroral flushes, sent along the wavering vista of his dream. Not only around our infancy doth heaven in all its splendors lie, daily with souls that cringe and plot, we Sinai's climb and know it not. Against our fallen and traitor lives, the great winds utter prophecies, and with our faint hearts, the mountain strives. In arms outstretched, the druid wood waits with its benedictity, and to our age's drowsy blood still shouts the inspiring sea. Earth gets its price for what earth gives us. The beggar is taxed for a corner to die in. The priest hath his fee who comes and shrives us. We bargain for the graves we lie in. At the devil's booth are all things sold. Each ounce of dross costs its ounce of gold. For cap and bells our lives we pay. Bubbles we buy for the whole soul's tasking. 'Tis only heaven that is given away. 'Tis only God may be had for the asking.